My name is Rory Singer. Got an engineering degree from the University of Georgia. I've been a professional fighter since 2001, sort of last fight was 2009, and I'm co-owner of the Hardcore Gym here in Athens, Georgia with my brother Adam, who's sitting next to me.
I am Adam Singer. I started at University of Georgia in 1996. I think I went to school for like 14 years. Eventually I finished with a master's in engineering. I should have a couple PhDs, but fighting sort of took some of my time. I've co-owned a gym with my brother for about the last 15 years, and any dates we give you just have to take with a grain of salt. So as far as achievements and accolades, we've had 2 world champions, Brian Bowles and Forrest Griffin. We're the only gym in Georgia to have even 1 world champion. We've been voted Gym of the Year many times, Coach of the Year many times. We've had 4 fighters on the Ultimate Fighter TV show. Many amateur champions, many pro champions, and we've had many of our students graduate and go on to some other awesome careers, military, police, doctors, lawyers. I think we've touched a lot of lives.
And then most recently we won the Athens Banner Herald Reader's Choice Award for Best Martial Arts Studio for the year 2014.
Round 1, fight!
I guess it started when I was 11. Adam started teaching me martial arts. We just started, from there, started training martial arts. Basically, it hasn't stopped in some form or fashion. We've been doing something, wrestling in high school and things of that nature, taekwondo, karate, all the jeet kune do. We've done stick and knife fighting, just done a lot of things. And over the course of time and doing all those arts, we both sort of realized around the same time that things were missing. And we didn't like being stuck in sort of like a rule set. We had to do certain things certain ways, and we found a boxing coach and a Muay Thai coach, and we were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and doing all those things. We sort of just said one day, let's put it together and go fight. And in 2009, we actually both made our amateur debuts.
No. 2009?
Oh, in 1999.
Right. So 1993 is when the first UFC started. Roy and I were training karate together. And every Friday night they used to let us, even though we weren't black belts, they used to let us come spar with them. And we were basically just punching bags to them. And then the UFC comes out and we watch this small guy just beat up all these karate guys, all these bigger guys and stuff by what looked like wrestling at that point. We hadn't trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that point, so it looked like wrestling. So the next time we went back, we're like, why don't we just tackle all these guys and beat them up on the ground, since we had both wrestled in high school. And I think the important thing about the UFC and seeing mixed martial arts start is it just clicked with us. It was just like, this is what we want to do. Like, we don't want to stand up and punch each other in the chest, we don't want to kick each other in the head, like, we want to do everything. And it just sort of snowballed from there, and the fact that we are so close in age and demeanor and things like that, it was just a natural fit for us to do it together. And the problem was, in the mid-90s, when we were down here, no one was doing this kind of stuff. So if we wanted to do it, we had to teach other people how to do it, and then we could all do it together. And that's basically how we got into coaching and eventually, you know, the gym that we have now. So we started with a small group at the University of Georgia. That's probably 1998, 7. They gave us the wrestling room late. We had like late Tuesday night, late Sunday night, and people would just come through. And we were really working through the ideas of mixed martial arts and starting down the path. Sometimes we would fight in the elevator. Sometimes we would go train on top of the parking deck. Like, we were doing some really crazy stuff back then. Eventually we had a small group, and the university didn't really love what we were doing, so we moved into a very small warehouse right off of 441. And then, you know, about every 3 or 4 years we got bigger and we improved our facilities. We moved across the street and we doubled that location. Eventually we moved to this location. Now we've doubled this location. So it's just been a nice progression for us from very humble beginnings to what we have now.
The UFC and the perception of mixed martial arts has certainly gotten better over the years. Just think about the terminology that we use now. We're speaking about a company. It's like saying Xerox for making a copy of something. So people will actually talk about UFC fighting sort of interchangeably with mixed martial arts, where back in the day it was called no holds barred fighting, and it was no rules, and there was they called it human, chicken fighting. I don't know if we can say that on the camera.
I think we say human cockfighting.
So human cockfighting, and and it's certainly moved far away from that. Now there are still people and there's still detractors and always will be, because it's still a young sport, but it has definitely moved away from that thought process, that mentality, into something that's more mainstream, and it's a $1 billion industry that's spearheaded by the UFC, but there's fights all over the place now.
But it's still not legal everywhere. So like we're in Georgia, which is a hotbed of mixed martial arts. It's been a hotbed of mixed martial arts since the late 90s. And so we take for granted, but New York State, still illegal to have mixed martial arts fights. They vote on it all the time, and it keeps being turned down, even though fights at Madison Square Garden would be an amazing event. I mean, I would fly up there in a heartbeat. So even though the perception as a mainstream sport has definitely improved, there are still people that don't necessarily, they're not really educated on the sport, and they still see it as something negative.
So that's the main challenge of globalization, is kind of people's perception.
Well, globalization is happening regardless. The UFC has fought over the last couple of years in China, they're in Australia this weekend, South America. I mean, they've been everywhere. You fought what? You fought in Ireland?
I fought in Ireland, I fought in Japan, I fought obviously in Canada, well, it's North America, but Canada, United States, all up and down the East Coast.
There's a TUF show in Mexico right now.
South Africa.
Right, so I
South
mean, it's
Africa.
all over. So globalization is going to happen. There's more stigma maybe in America than there necessarily is outside of America.
Round 2. Fight.
Forrest Griffin, I fight in the UFC. I kind of just ran out of sports to do. I wasn't good enough to play college football, and I was just looking for something to do, something athletic. And they actually had I was doing some tough man contests, and they actually had a mixed martial arts club, or an NHB club, as it were, at the University of Georgia, which went on to become the hardcore gym. And I just went in there, and I was pretty in good shape. I just beat anybody up, and we started messing around. And this skinny kid crumpled me up, twisted me up, had me like tapping. I didn't even know how to tap. And then this big guy was throwing me around, doing weird stuff to me, just beating the crap out of me. And I was like, man, maybe there's something to this, man. I gotta figure this out,
I guess since I do the majority of the head coaching, I'll answer that first. I love coaching. And I think just like anything that you want to be good at, if you have a love for it, then you'll attack it with a drive that to me can only lead to being successful. So as a coach, I'm constantly studying coaching. I'm constantly studying coaches and how things are done in other sports. And I'm always bringing that back to here. I'm never closed-minded. I was lucky enough to have Forrest in the UFC, Rory in the UFC, other guys in the UFC, and it put me in close contact with coaches, and it opened the doors for me to ask them questions and pick their brains. And I've always ascribed to just asking questions and listening. And so you'd be really surprised. You buy a guy a cup of coffee at a Starbucks at the UFC, and he'll answer any question you need to. And so that's been a really big help for me. Just my love of coaching and love, of learning. I'm an engineer also. I mean, so I look at everything analytically. I look at everything through a research framework, a scientific framework, and I'm just constantly trying to get better at it.
All right. Anything else to add?
A lot of my experiences as a coach, come from Adam, since, like you said, he does the majority of it. This thing I enjoy coaching just because I enjoy helping people. After I got an engineering degree, there was a period of time I went back to school to try and get a nursing degree, and realized had I been a younger man with sort of the older man responsibility, I probably would have went to medical school. And I enjoy being on a mat with anyone who has something they're trying to accomplish, whether it's one of my students, Tim, who lost 100 pounds in 10 months, or it's one of my amateur athletes that's just looking to one day go pro and have a career. getting to the UFC, things of that nature. I don't hold any of those to any higher regard than any of the others. It's just, this is what you want, and how can I help you do that?
I have evolved as a coach over the last 10 or 15 years as I've come to understand the needs of the athletes in different ways. I am more of, I guess, what you'd term a player's coach. You know, there are coaches who are real, adversarial is not the word, but sort of by the books. They're in charge and everyone does what they say. I am more like, and it's because of my personality, more of a co-coach, if you will. Maybe I just made that term up. TM. Where I like to really work with the fighters and with my athletes and accommodate their needs in all of their life, basically. You know, I think it's important for me to understand where they're coming from, how their mindset is affected outside the gym by the people that surround them, by their upbringing, and I try and really learn that a lot more than I used to. Used to be really cookie cutter, and I think over the last 5 or 6 years I've really come to delve more into my fighter's mentality. MMA is definitely an individual sport in a team setting, if you will, or a team sport in an individual setting. I don't know, you have to figure that one out for yourself. And so all the pieces fit together, but at the end of the day, they have to perform on their own. And there are a lot of places that can go wrong in the training and the competition. And the last few years, I've really worked hard to try and head a lot of that off before it happens. As far as physical preparation, I give my fighters a lot of leeway to succeed or fail on their own. I used to be a real stickler to make sure guys were training X number of times a day, X number of times a week, and doing this and doing that. And I've really backed off that, because if they don't want to do it, if they don't want to strive to be successful on their own, I realize there's almost nothing that I can do to change that. I can yell at them, I can call them, I can go pick them up, but if they don't want to do it on their own, there's very little I can do.
I was at the Touchdown Club for the University of Georgia dinner the other day, and I don't remember a lot of things, so I certainly don't remember the coach who was speaking, but
Dan Henning.
There you go, Dan Henning, who's 40 years experience in football and in coaching, and he basically said something that we've discussed before in the past, is that when you sign up to play football, or you sign up to fight professionally as a mixed martial artist or to box, then you have basically stated that you understand the risks that are involved. Now, if a coach walks up to you and hits you over the head with a 2x4 and you get a concussion, then you probably weren't really prepared for that sort of risk. But getting punched in the head, going helmet to helmet with another football player, you signed up for that. I can't necessarily feel bad. What I can feel bad about, and where I can say, okay, well, maybe this person didn't necessarily understand because they weren't guided the right way and didn't have the proper coach, and they took more punishment and abuse than they should have. Then I can feel sorry for that athlete. When I see little 5 and 6, 7-year-old kids going helmet to helmet, and coaches cheering that on in videos online, and it wrenches my gut apart. It makes me sick, and I can't even watch it with the sound on because it just visually affects me so much. Those little kids don't necessarily know what they've signed up for. You get into high school, you might still not understand the repercussions of your actions, and if you have a coach that's like that, then again, you might not have understood what you're signing up for. But years and years of football, years and years of playing in college, and then in the NFL, or years of training, even lightly, you're still gonna, one or two are gonna get away every now and again. You're gonna get knocked out in a fight. You're gonna get hit a little too hard in training. You signed up for that. You shouldn't be able to sue for that, in my opinion.
Finish him!
Alright, so here's my thing about performance-enhancing drugs in the sport. If you can't get rid of them, if you can't assure me that every single person is clean of everything, then it almost seems like a waste of time to test. Now I know that's provocative to say it that way, but the more money an athlete has and the more fame he has, the more access he's going to have to science that the lower level guys are not going to have access to. And that's the thing that worries me. It doesn't worry me that a 35-year-old fighter takes growth hormone to be able to train and continue his career. It doesn't bother me that a 30-year-old fighter is taking testosterone replacement therapy to stay and keep his career going. What bothers me is that there are things that we don't even know about right now at the highest levels of the sport that we can't test for, that we don't know about. And in a sport that is as possibly violent as mixed martial arts, that's the advantages that I don't want to have. I don't care if a guy is in cycling is on some kind of new drug that no one else knows about. They'll deal with that because other guys are on other things that people don't know about. But if two guys step in the cage, I'd like it to be as even as possible. Now, you can go further and say, well, an athlete that has a better camp has an advantage. An athlete with that can afford better nutrition, better trainers and things like that. But to me, those are all things that we can all level the playing field with that. But when we're talking about designer drugs and things like that, either you take them totally out of the sport or you understand that they're a part of the sport.
You know, I was always of the mind that this was illegal, and you know people are doing it, but my own ethics are just that it's not for me to do. If I do it wrong, there are long-term repercussions, and is a 10-year block of time where I may have some fame and some fortune worth losing 10 years of my life to liver failure or something else. So personally, just on that front, it wasn't something I wanted to do.
It's the final countdown.
Alright, so you put us in a rock and a hard place because we obviously are not going to talk badly about any organization because we have young fighters that we hope to fight in those organizations at some point. But I don't want that to look like we're hiding anything. The UFC has recently instituted medical insurance for their fighters, which I think is a fantastic start at making sure their fighters are a lot healthier. I think Dana White has been very vocal about some of the injuries that have happened in training camps and trying to get that to change a little bit. From a practical standpoint from him, because losing fights is bad. I think the UFC lost 5 main event fights this year.
Didn't they cancel an event altogether?
So
they've never done that. I mean, that was like one of the first times, the only time they've ever done that.
Right. So even just from a practical standpoint, I think that Dana White and the UFC are very cognizant of fighter safety and fighter health. The small organizations, they don't all have the money to do that. And I think that the fighters understand, or they need to understand the risk. If a fighter doesn't have health insurance, I would encourage them to not necessarily take this up as a career.
Have there been any issues from Tough? Yes, there was a period of time when I was basically, I'm not even going to say what I was going to say because I don't even want to go there with that word.
Why don't you censor yourself?
No, I don't even want to go there with that word. There was a period of time where I definitely felt that I was sort of being mocked or mistreated by some of my teammates or maybe some people on the other team, and not necessarily realizing who it was. There was an incident where I took someone's headgear and rubbed it between my butt cheeks, and then the reaction was for that person to pee on my headgear, and all these things sort of come out when you're watching this on television. So like, I don't know that the headgear that I still use to this day, that's how well it was made, was sprinkled on by Ed Herman.
You still use that headgear?
Yeah, still got it.
That's right.
And I don't think that the person who's, I don't even remember, because I can't remember, but I don't remember whose headgear I rubbed in between my cheeks. That person didn't know that happened until they saw it on television. So was that the right way to handle that situation? I don't know. Probably wasn't. But you live in a house with 15 other people for 6 weeks, and you're very much isolated from the real world, and it makes you a little stir crazy, and you make poor decisions.
It's the martial arts, in the mixed martial arts, that's really kept us. If this was just a sport, if it was just come in here, practice, and go home like other sports, I don't know if we would have stayed involved the way we have through these years. but it's the martial art, it's the growth of everyone in here that makes it all worthwhile.